Just organizing my screens here, one last second. Sorry about that. Okay, so I'm going to share. Hi everyone, welcome to this session. I'm going to just do a quick presentation about why we're meeting here, what this workshop, well, it's more of a discussion than a workshop. And I guess I just want to start by saying this is really, like I mentioned many times to those who I've invited to join us, this is really like a conversation, and it's really a way to generate some initial ideas on a conversation that's just beginning. So nothing is really, there's no set plan. It's really just, are we looking at something that's worth digging in deeper? You know, what are the pros and cons of what we're looking at? What ideas can we get from the group that are here at Fab 16? And then we have some very interesting guests who have tons of experience with, you know, motivating youth and running various events and challenges and all kinds of things. So we should be able to get some good ideas out of this. So I will start my presentation, and then we'll meet at the end of that. Okay, so welcome again. Help design an open innovation challenge for youth and sustainable action in Fab Labs. It's a bit of a winded title, but it sort of sums it up a bit. My name is Alec Matthews, and I run I'm the coordinator and design teacher at Lower Canada College, and I run the LCC Fab Lab. Like most labs, we bring kids in, we excite them about making, and we get them to design objects and think critically about how those objects they make sort of fit into the world. So we touch all kinds of aspects of making, and like most labs, we're always amazed about what the students come up with. We also do integration with teachers. So we meet with teachers and say, how do these ideas, how does making fit into an experiential learning at school? What can we do? How can we design pedagogy around this idea of working with your hands and coming up with problems and making mistakes? And actually, Edward, who's on the call, this is one of his projects down here from a math class in grade 9. We run design classes, but I just wanted to show how, but for us, sustainability is at the heart of our design classes. And we have two projects here. The first one, the same student actually, the first one, the project was repurpose an object that was going to be thrown out or that you found, and try and use no new material. And what we started off was we did some research on the Anthropocene and how humans are impacting the planet, and just to see how industry changes the surface of the planet and coming up with ideas. And so the student, you know, took a basketball and some LED lights and an old cap from a jar or something and made that hanging lamp. And then on the right, we had a sustainable design challenge. You basically had some constraints you had to work with. So you got a location, an architecture type, and a, what was the other one? A location, architecture type, and a material that you had to include. And this student got a tiny house in the mountains, and the goal was the year is 2050. You have to sort of speculate what living might be like in that time. And so the speculative design was really powerful at getting them to think outside the box, mixed with the constraints. We also, like a lot of Fab Labs, we teach how to document your work, share the technical information so that other people can follow in your process. But at the same time, just how to be concise and express yourself. Where's your design thinking coming from? What ideas are you generating? And how are those, and how do you communicate those? And like most schools, we run fairs. So we have a design, I think the last fair we ran was a combination between junior school art fair, science fair, and our design fair. This is pre-COVID. This is just the year right before. So we didn't get to run this sort of format again, but it was called STEAM Day. And essentially, instead of having multiple fairs, we created our little bubble. This is LCC's role. This is what we're doing. And like most schools, this is great for building community around what you're doing in the school. But I'm also aware that our lab is really creativity focused, and the goal is to also get students to tinker. So I'm really into the constructionism over instructionism approach, and it's not always about the finished product. So we encourage students to play with materials, and translating that, how do you play with technology? Like how do you play with a laser cutter safely? How can you tinker with some of these sort of bigger tools? So we have a lot of this kind of activity happening in the lab, a lot of variety of different kinds of things. So I kind of like to think of them as like mechanisms for the art of learning, or as Seymour Papert would call it, methodics. And here's an example of, I think, a good mechanism for the art of learning is what happens in robotics competitions. The experience of motivating youth through these competitions is incredible. And you have students who are coming on the weekends, they're coming after school, they're putting tons of time into this, and they have these constraints and challenges that they have to work with. And it's a great example of something that's not part of the school curriculum that motivates them to be part of something that is bigger than they are, or feels is exciting and draws them to an event. So I see there's other things like that in schools: robotics competitions, Model UN's another one, debating championships, science fit, regional and national science fairs, plays and concerts, conferences and trips, tournaments. We have these mechanisms for getting kids in sort of experiential aspects of learning that I think are really important in school. I have this image here because I have up on my office this project that was incomplete, that didn't get finished. The student drew, basically learned how to use a vector drawing tool and did a beautiful tracing of a butterfly. Came in, we set up the embroidery machine, started working, and then, as all embroidery machines do, the thread broke. And she had to leave. She's like, I gotta go. I was like, well, we could just, so time was up. So she goes. And it took about, the student has been in the lab many times and is really into trying new things. And we said, okay, we'll set it up for you. You come back and you do it. You can finish it. And months go by, and unfortunately she never came back. It's not because she wasn't interested. She was passionate about what she was doing, but something sort of stopped her in coming back. It was that sort of mechanical threshold that she didn't, that barrier that happened. So why that happens, something I want to think about a lot in our job, because we have a lot of projects that get incomplete, but it's not for any reason other than, a time, or there's just nothing grounding them to come back to complete the project. So for me, often I talk about this with my students, is just finding a new approach to learning in the space. So at the beginning of the year now, with the design students and in co-curricular, if I can, the idea is like, let's not find the quick and easy route. It's okay and it's normal to zigzag around, run into roadblocks, reorient yourself, excuse me, and then wind your way up to some end result, which is usually a goal of some kind, and that goal could shift. So why are we proposing a challenge? I think that there is an opportunity here to build some kind of event around the Fab Lab maker mentality in schools that grounds them, like a robotics competition, like a science fair, like these other events, that says, okay, you know what, it's okay that I didn't finish my butterfly, but I want to get it ready for this thing, right? And I find that there is a bit of that's where we have an opportunity. This is my personal opinion at the moment, but here's our network, okay? Network of Fab Labs around the world. It's growing, and Fab Labs, maker spaces, different kinds of hacker spaces, but on this map, there are many spaces around the world that are, thinking about these issues. And so I asked myself, like, what is a Fab Lab without the network? At that point, like, the network is so integral into the identity of a Fab Lab. And I'm always talking to students about, there's a bunch of labs just like this one that you could one day share your material. Someone in Europe can make the lamp that you made, and you can take an idea from someone in a different part of the world and fabricate it here. So that's a very powerful thing in the Fab Lab network. Also, if we look at if we look at Fab 16, for example, this is just from the live fablabs.io platform. 92 members when I took the screenshot, and I checked, that was this morning, but 92 members identify as educators. And that's the highest number. So this is an educational environment. And one part of creating this culture, Liz, I hope you're okay. Sorry, this is Liz. This is something that Liz is in charge of. And I think it's a great first step in building a culture around education and Fab Labs. So this is something that's starting up. but you have teachers and Fab Lab facilitators looking at how to integrate these in schools. So that's one element of it, but we could still use another element to help support that, which I think is some kind of event. The other element is we're always talking about the Sustainable Development Goals, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and they're amazing, sort of ambitious goals that we have to work towards. They're wicked problems, as we say in design. They're challenging, they're very complicated. And I think that it's important, again, and a challenge is, or something that is bigger than you are, that gets you around these ideas, working hard towards them. And I know this is happening. The variety of organizations are doing this, but certainly in the Fab Lab network, it would be nice to see this, I think. So my question is there an opportunity here? We have these great initiatives that go on. Is there something that we can do like this in this environment? And so I'm hoping that from this gathering here, we can just hash out some ideas. And then, and it could be that, no, this is just too complicated, but I think that we can. And so let's develop some ideas. And I'm just going to show one, for example, that I was like, okay, what ideas can I think of? One way that I think this would work nicely is, let's say you had a box and in the box, you had a learning kit. So you had your science, you had open source technology, you had a repository of ideas and techniques, a material that you could use, a theme or a topic. And that was distributed among different Fab Labs. And what if those Fab Labs, integrated those, encouraged youth in their organizations to get involved in this challenge? They each get this little package, and, we can have, youth and students and people talking from one side of the planet to the other, working on the same kind of project. Out of it, we can have art and design projects, science and technology projects, social innovation projects, but they're basing themselves around a theme and a common goal. And it would be a really neat way to sort of leverage the network. We would start, so obviously this is a local thing. So this is something you would do locally, but then you can spread it globally. So I think, like in terms of the Fab Lab network, this is the kind of thing that is waiting to happen. And I know in our case, in our school, in our particular school, this would be a very powerful way to get more students in co-curricular activities. And those cases where students are kind of less, there's nothing nothing pushing them past that element that's blocking them, being involved in a community like this could be really helpful. So there is the poll everywhere. That's probably not going to work. Okay. There is I don't know. Yeah,
Alec,
go ahead.
Are you presenting, or are you just showing the slides?
Well, at this point, I'm going to stop. I was just wanted to try the poll everything, but I don't want to waste time if it's not going to work. So
it'll work if you show the link. It's just you have to actually put it in presentation mode.
Oh, it can't be. That's why. Okay. All right. Thank you. No, it seems to be still doing that. The link's not there. Okay. Okay.
Strange. I'll paste links.
Okay. So, sorry about that, everyone. So without, I'll just present here.
Everybody, just comment on the slides that Alec is on, and that way you can comment on them from Google Docs yourselves directly. I've shared the doc itself. And to answer Joel's question, yes, we're going to get to the discussion point now that Alec has gone through his first part of his introduction. He'll do a little bit more in a second, and then we're going to open it up for discussion. Okay, does that help?
Okay, so I now want to introduce the guests that we've invited. Have graciously taken time to come and meet with us and talk. So this is less about me chatting, but let's open it up to the discussion. So I'm going to I'll just do a quick intro to everyone on this list, and then maybe we'll share everyone's cameras and we can start the conversation. So Dale Doherty is representing the maker community. Dale Doherty is I've read often that he's referred to as the father of the maker movement. I don't know if he likes that term or not. But he's no stranger to the Fab Lab Network, and he's I think the founder of Make Media and Maker Faire events. So it's very exciting to have him involved in this conversation. John Greisberger, I apologize again if I'm mispronouncing names, is the manager of global impact strategy at Xprize. And he's got an accomplished history involved in progressive project management and innovation programming. Rennie Barlow is the executive director of Youth Science Canada, a national charitable organization that fuels the curiosity of Canadian youth through science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, STEM projects. I'm not sure if Anne-Louise is on the conversation yet. She was having connection issues, but Anne-Louise.
I'm here.
Oh, hi, great, thank you. So Anne-Louise is an associate professor of education at Concordia University, and she's the research chair in maker culture. She's the director of the Concordia University Innovation Lab, which is a fairly new lab. And she is also the associate director of the Milieu Institute for Arts, Culture, and Technology. And so, yeah, thank you, Anne-Louise. Yuri Fata works with ICAO, which is the International Civil Aviation Organization, which is a branch of the UN. Yuri is an engineer and a program manager at ICAO and is involved in innovation at ICAO. And in 2019, he coordinated ICAO's first innovation fair, which I was lucky enough to be able to bring some students to. Christine Rebel is a co-founder and chief innovation officer at Wikifactory, a platform designed around the concept of open hardware, but it is much more than that. Essentially, it's also a social platform, and it's basically dedicated to productivity and sharing, open innovation. So, and what's nice is that, and she'll probably talk about this, but there's a section now on that platform that's devoted to supporting challenges, challenge-based initiatives, and has the tools needed to support sort of challenge-oriented projects. Natasha Vitali, again, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your last name because I've always called you from your first name, but she's a member of a wildly successful robotics competition here in Canada. It's called the CRC Robotics competition. And she's been involved in the organization, helping to design competitions and also expanding their impact through communities. And Liz White-Wolf, as many of you already know, works with the Fab Foundation and is the K-12 education director, but it is involved also in so many other aspects of the Fab Lab community. Prior to this, she was a senior director of STEM education at Carnegie Mellon Science Center in Pittsburgh and was responsible for setting up their mobile Fab Lab initiative and museum makerspace. We also had Justin Alio, who's unfortunately was not able to make it, but he will be looped in afterwards. But he's the founding director of the Readiness Institute at Penn State, and he's well known for his thoughts on academic achievement, equity, leadership, STEM, artificial intelligence, and a bunch of other impressive accolades to his name. So I look forward to touching base with him afterwards. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing now, and I would. Thank you for that. Let's start talking. I'm going to start with Dale. I hope Dale, I read recently because it's in my mind right now. I read recently an article that you wrote. I don't know, maybe a couple years old. Plan C or no? Plan C. Challenges. Yeah. When was that? That was 2020.
Last year. Yeah.
Last year, right. And so what I really like is you're discussing the difference between meaningful and trivial calls to action and challenges. You're sort of, how do you form your challenge around something that works for the community? Problem setting is a big part of that, right? So how do you set the problem of your challenge and make it so that it counts? And so what advice would you give those? Like, so if we're setting up a challenge, what do you think is like one of the things that, like, how would you define problem setting in that context?
Well, let me not address that initially. Let me just say, I wanted to talk about a little bit what I thought was interesting that we were trying to do and did with Maker Faire was not to do any of that, to not kind of say, here's our goal, for the year, but what are you doing was the kind of the question. What are you already doing? And it kind of was a shift, I think, that's kind of interesting, is the expectation that people are already doing interesting things, but they don't have a place to share it. Versus, well, how do we get people to do interesting things? And it's kind of the difference between, say, a museum commissioning artists to do things in accord with, a project or a theme versus, gee, what kind of art is already being produced in there? And I felt there was something unique about that difference, that people who are motivated to create things create unusual things. And I wouldn't have seen them if I said, I'm only looking for this kind of thing, and so I think, there is a distinction to be made between the very young and the adults here. I think starter projects and getting kids engaged. But I will say that I've always felt like, especially in the educational context here, the most important thing I can advocate for is that students get to do projects. And increasingly, those projects are based on their own interests and ideas, not imposed on them from others. And so there is a line to draw between saying, how do we encourage kids to explore what the UN is interested in, or the Academy of Engineering. But I find that initially making that connection to things that they are interested in is really important. Because once they tap into their own motivation, they begin to move very fast, but again, that's an art, that's something that, teachers, I think, know how to do well. But that's kind of, I will say though, partly because of COVID, Maker Faire is getting shut down. Your STEAM fair is an example, very close to what Maker Faire is. And, I always thought that the purpose for participating in Maker Faire was to get feedback, that people like that. They like to hear other people more than, so we never offered awards or programs that, really said, hey, here's the top this or that. But what people told me, was, someone came up to them and liked their project and talked to them about it and asked good questions about it. And that was really fun. And also meeting others that were doing it was the secondary thing, that I'm part of a group of people that like to make things, and this person makes something different than me, but we can still have that conversation about what we like to do. So I think those things were really kind of important. But given COVID and the lack of what we're able to do, I've been thinking a lot about kind of awards programs or something. And again, probably not that interested in big prizes or money, but more recognition. And I think that for the younger student, getting some kind of formal recognition that they did something and others, reviewed it and cared about it, I think is really, really important. But one last thing, I often use sports as an analogy, but it's sort of being able to practice and perform. It isn't, I think sometimes we get stuck on the end result, like the prizes and who won, and not enough on, well, what did practice look like? How did they benefit from, being together with others and doing this, and how long did it take them, and who they meet, and all those things. And then, the presentation or communication of what they did, I think, is also very important. So we used to use the tagline show and tell, but it was at least part of it was making the thing, but being able to talk about it and to other people, I think, was very important.
I find that's a great, I agree with you 100%, but I find that only works for about half of our students. The other half are needing some sort of extrinsic value to participating in certain events. At least that's what I'm finding.
Yeah. I won't argue that, everything's hard to get 100% to, but, so there are kids that really love the robotics competitions. There are kids that don't, so you probably, depending on what your perspective is, you're designing different things for that. But I will say that, I think it's a big deal to be careful about the extrinsic motivations, when you when you're trying to reward kids to do things that they don't really care about except for the reward. You know, do you really unlock the potential of that person? It may, and again, you know, intermediate fashion, it might be fine, but maybe you don't want to, that's not what you ultimately want to get them to do.
We've certainly had many like students who, you know, the scope of their project might have been too big and they may not get to finish it, and that's fine. And you know what? They come back saying, I love this class, or I loved being in that lab, or I loved, and it has nothing to do with the finished product. And so that I totally, I fall in line with that as well.
Yeah. One last thing, I really want to hear from other people, but again, that's part of the culture of Maker Faire a little bit. But I see it more broadly with kids. Was kids were kind of interested in a non-judgmental sense. Like if you're expressing creativity, do you really want to be ranked 5th or 7th or things like that, you know? And when I look across a Maker Faire, it's like, gosh, they're so different. How would I ever kind of put them together? It's different when you say like, we have a challenge and, you know, it's just, you know, throw balls through a hoop or something like that with a robot, and some do it and some don't. But I think there's something to consider in allowing kids the freedom to try things and not worry too much about, you know, if they miss or fail or in that regard.
We'll celebrate the process.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's why I go for sports. I mean, your team could not, you know, maybe have a bad season, but you enjoyed doing it. You liked the practice. You liked doing it. That's where I'm trying to connect to.
Thank you. I'm going to actually ask now, Rennie, because I think it's an interesting sort of, there's another world here in the science fair community that you could talk about. And so what role do you see challenges playing in the Youth Science Canada sort of focus on STEM projects? Like what role do you see challenges? Do you see that sort of emerging in that environment? And what do you think about that?
Yeah, it's good. Thanks. Well, first of all, I just want to echo some of what Dale said. You know, there's a bit of a, you know, perhaps a stereotype around science fairs as being, you know, rather rigid and focused on competition and, you know, highly structured and whatever. And at least in Canada anyway, we've really shifted the emphasis more toward very much students working on projects about which they are passionate and that are relevant to them. In fact, we strongly encourage kids to identify questions and problems that are worth investigating and solving from their home, their school, their community, you know, what they're familiar with, and perhaps at the global level too. So in terms of the role of challenges for what we do, they're really there. And I see some of the comments in the, you know, in the chat around, you know, students sometimes needing a bit of a guide or a starting place or a scaffold to work with. And that's really how we've positioned our challenges. We have 8 challenge areas, and they're just simple 1-sentence statements. And the idea is really just to seed ideas and probably also to serve mostly as inspiration and empowerment. So, you know, for kids working on a STEM project, we basically have 2 types of projects that we invite kids to do in Canada. One are discovery projects and innovation projects. And discovery are more the scientific investigation, starting with a question and then, you know, going through and, you know, finding some new understanding of that question. And then innovation type projects, which are more on the engineering side, you know, identify a problem and then find a, you know, an improvement to an existing solution or a new solution to that problem. And so the challenges that we have are somewhat based on the sustainable goals from the UN. So there are things like agriculture.
Did I freeze it? Rennie,
He froze.
Okay.
The role of those challenges is really around inspiration and empowerment. And the idea is to get kids to realize that they can tackle things that are bigger than perhaps what they thought. We have a tendency, particularly as adults, and I would argue as teachers as well, because I was a teacher for 15 years and a school principal for 5. We really have a tendency to underestimate the capacity of youth, and as several people have already said, sometimes when you see what they've done, you're blown away. You're amazed at what they can produce. So we tend to use the challenges more as inspiration and less as constraining. And in fact, we have what we call a kind of catch-all challenge, which is curiosity and ingenuity, which is for all those projects that don't really fit into one of the others. And it's really to celebrate that process of being curious and coming up with ingenious ideas. And so we see all kinds of amazing things.
That's great. John Greisberger. So John, maybe you can just introduce yourself a bit, and I'm curious to know how education fits in at the Xprize, because that's, when we think of some innovation and competition, Xprize is sort of this incredible thing that's happening in the world. So maybe you could talk a bit about how, like Rennie was saying, how youth will surprise you with what they're capable of. But also, I've noticed that generally youth just want to be included in the plan making, and get to meet really interesting people. So John, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, and how you sort of approach it.
Yeah, I'm happy to get to that. I think it might help first if I provide a little bit of context around Xprize and the current project I'm working on. And for those of you that might not be too familiar with Xprize, we're a nonprofit organization based in Los Angeles, California. And our mission is to inspire and empower a global community of problem solvers to positively impact our world. And to facilitate this, we design and operate multi-million-dollar global incentivized prize competitions to solve some of the world's biggest challenges. And we feel that solutions to these problems can come from anyone, anywhere. And I support the Xprize Rainforest competition. It's a 5-year, $10 million competition that is designed to improve the world's understanding of rainforest ecosystems. And unfortunately, we're seeing that rainforests are disappearing at a rate of 1 football field every 6 seconds because they're undervalued. However, we feel that rainforests are invaluable because of the ecosystem services they provide all humanity and for the biodiversity which they contain. However, we're not able to fully assess and monitor the full biodiversity of rainforests using current technology. And so with this competition, we're challenging our teams to develop novel technology to rapidly and comprehensively survey biodiversity in multiple stories of the rainforest, and to use data and deliver insights in near real time, which will ultimately promote the health and conservation of rainforests worldwide. And before I get into your question about education in our prize competitions, I just wanted to highlight in a previous Xprize competition, the Ocean Discovery Xprize, where teams were challenged to map the deepest parts of the ocean floor. There was a high school team that participated from Northern California, and this team did so well in the competition that they won the NOAA bonus prize of $1 million. And there's also a documentary about this team, which is currently streaming on Amazon Prime. And so with us, education is something that we build into every prize competition. And for the one that I'm supporting, we do education initiatives both internally within the competition and externally to our ecosystem around the Xprize Rainforest competition. And so during the team recruitment phase of the competition, where we were really trying to raise awareness of what it is that we were doing to try to get teams to enter and participate, we participated in a number of virtual events to raise awareness of issues pertaining to tropical rainforests and biodiversity. And these virtual events took place through the Natural History Museum of Los Angeles. And we also participated in several virtual events through Smithsonian. And early on in this competition, we also supported a Rainforest Kids Challenge, which is currently ongoing. And that is designed and led by an organization called Design for Change. And that aims to educate children about the importance of standing forests and encourage them to be part of a community that cares for them. And we also really seek to educate the teams that participate in our competition. We recently had a team summit at the end of July with all our competing teams, and we invited experts to present to our teams on topics like entrepreneurship, designing technology to be deployed in rainforests, biodiversity, global conservation initiatives, policy making, and also inclusive project design. And over the course of the competition, we also have plans for much larger scale public awareness campaigns and education initiatives as well.
So that's a Design for Change. I'm just putting that up in the I believe, yes, should be in the chat now. So yeah, it's nice to see like there's ways to wrap students and kids into these sort of bigger, larger than life projects. And I think, you know, the students that I've worked with, sometimes it's just nice, like I said earlier, just to be part of that conversation. And part of that sort of the innovation idea. What does innovation look like for youth? That's one. So this is sort of off the cuff question, but it's making me think of that. Maybe Anne-Louise, I don't know if you want to introduce yourself and the innovation lab, but you know, I think as adults, we know what innovation looks like. We could think about it in terms of industry and in terms of technology. What might it look like, you know, for younger audiences?
Well, it's kind of interesting that you say that, Alec, because I was having a conversation with Bart Simon today, who is the director of the Institute, and he said, you know, what's not innovation? We all claim that we're doing innovation, and we keep on doing it over and over again. So what is it exactly? So I guess I mean, you introduced me well enough with all the responsibilities and the roles that I play, but I think that if I can introduce me a bit more humbly, myself a bit more humbly, I'm really curious about how we can prepare students to face what comes next. There's certainly one thing as an educator that I keep on thinking with the recent changes, with the COVID pandemic, with the entry into the fourth industrial revolution, is that the only thing that I'm sure about is that I am unsure about what's coming next. And you know, even if I try to imagine, you know, in 2012, I was not able to imagine that we would have so many electric cars. That was just, you know, barely, not even 10 years ago. And you know, there's no way for me to really figure out what that's going to look like. But one thing I can tell you for sure is that youth wants to try things. They want to be creative. They are full of energy. They want to change the world. But we keep on turning that flame down generation after generation after generation. And one of the things that we do, and I think it touches upon a lot of the things that have been said before, is that we say, oh, let's try something creative. But then as educators, we have an end product in mind. And we think, well, we're going to guide them to go there. And as soon as somebody comes up with a good idea, we kind of like turn that down. We say, no, this is not where I want to take you. So the real creativity and the real innovation and the real ideas that they might have, we keep on, you know, taking those down. So what I think we need to look at is what great ideas do they have? What things do they really want to change? What aspects of their own lives, or, you know, either local or global world, they want to have agency on? And I think that genuinely, if we start looking at this is going to be a truly innovative, a true innovation for education. And also perhaps, and there's so many things I want to say about this, but stepping away from, I would say, the narrative sickness that we have. We're good at narrating things in education. We suffer from narrative sickness. And we like to say how things will unfold. We like to plan things. But, you know, one of the studies that I conducted over summer with my team is that we've interviewed Fab Lab managers and facilitators from all sorts of maker spaces, Fab Labs, open creative labs. And one of the things that, you know, I keep on asking them is, how do you prepare yourself to meet your learners? How do you become, what are the qualities of a good Fab Lab manager, facilitator, animator, workshop? You know, how do you prepare yourself for workshops that are ill-defined, that you don't know where this is going to go, and you know that you will face challenges? So there's a lot there that to be unpacked. But I think, you know, in essence, if you're asking me, what does innovation mean for youth? It's anything that turns on their flame and that they really want to pursue. And that the answer is as simple as that. But, you know, there's so much to be done, so much to be said. And a lot of the practices that we keep on saying we need to stop doing that, when we start looking at what happens in practice, the old approaches keep on being repeated over and over again. And in essence, there's a few reasons why this happens. There's the curriculum that needs to be met. There's the standardized tests that need to be, you know, that need to be, people need to think about those. And then there's all the classroom, you know, I guess the division of subject matter. There's also the fact that the time, you know, 40 minutes or 75-minute periods constrain a lot. You mentioned that, Alec, earlier on, like some of the projects that are not getting completed. I think part of the time sometimes is that there's no time to actually tinker. And I know that, you know, in the cases of my maker spaces, when I leave them open, people come in and sometimes you just spend a lot of time just in the space thinking about things and sometimes doing other things. But because the space is open, they're able to tinker a little bit more. So I think having those spaces will be, you know, replicated and open and more available will definitely be of essence to help youth. There was one thing also that I wanted to say when Dale started speaking, and it's that, you know, we don't want competition, we don't want an elite. But one of the things also that, you know, I must say, even for myself as a scholar and as a practitioner as well, I received an email earlier this week, and it said, you know, there's something that just came out. It's called the Best Maker Schools 2021 from Make and Newsweek. And I started reading this and I said, oh, who can I connect with? Look at that. Oh, look at that. They had a methodology. And I started looking at this. Oh, they had a lot of criteria. Oh, that's fun. So I started looking at this, and then I look and I'm like, oh, Concordia University is there. Oh, we made it to the list. So it's not a ranked list. It's just, we're there. And look at all these other people I can speak to. So if we can actually replicate this for youth, we can actually say, you know, it's not an elite. There's not just one single winner. And it's true that in some cases it's fun to have competitions where there is indeed an elite winner, you know, team of winners, and it does something good for some youth. But for some other youth, just the fact that you can put yourself out there, that your idea is there. And you look at the success of TikTok, for example, everybody has a voice. You know, I've been fighting with TikTok for over a year, and I think I have 20 followers. But my nephew, who is 14 years old, you know, just recently got his 1,000 followers. So putting yourself out there, being able to voice something, talk about what you genuinely want to do, what motivates you, what really what you're curious about. That's innovation.
I appreciate, yeah, that's a nice way to put it. I remember being interviewed. Actually, I was one of your interviewees for your research, and my answer to that was just seeing kids come back. If they come back, that's a good sign. And when they leave the door, I'm like, are you coming back? That sort of has always been my metric. And then they do often, a lot of students just hang out. I know Edward's on the chat here. We would have good conversations in the lab, not necessarily making, you know, it's not about always doing, sometimes it's about thinking, right? And so that was a nice part. You make me think, maybe Natasha is a good time to sort of wrap you into the conversation here. So Natasha, basically the CRC robotics competition is a really interesting robotics competition because it's a competition, but at the same time, it's a lot more. So maybe, I don't know, it's not the question I was going to lead with, but maybe that's a good way to start is could you describe it and maybe the parts of it that, you know, sort of fit into the conversation we're having? I think Natasha might be frozen.
Yeah, for sure. I'd love. Is this better?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Let me sit here. I'll go closer to the router. All right. Yeah. So the CRC robotics competition, it is a robotics competition, but it's a lot more. First of all, it's a multidisciplinary competition. So it really kind of bridges robotics with arts, with music, with programming, with website design and stuff like that. So it's very, very broad in terms of what the students can touch and what they can learn. And it really gives them an opportunity to kind of just dive in and start learning and start getting their hands dirty. It's funny because every time I talk about CRC, people are like, how did you get involved? And I basically got involved with the organization by being an actual participant in the competition. I was actually heading into law, like completely out of sciences. I was like, I'm gonna be a lawyer. I'm gonna work in an office with like a nice suit all the time and go into court and like represent clients and stuff like that. I was going completely into law. And then I discovered the robotics club at my high school and joined. And it was kind of like, oh, I like this. Like, I like getting my hands dirty and I like learning new things. And I like, being able to build something from absolutely nothing. And so I kind of made the switch to engineering at that point, and kind of never looked back and went into engineering. And then I got involved with the organization because I believed in the mission. I believed in the values and the mission to expand that and to get more students involved. And I feel like if I was able to switch my path to engineering and really discover my passion is engineering and not law, maybe there are other kids who can discover that same passion, right? And discover that, okay, well, maybe I am suited to be an engineer, right? And before robotics, I didn't even know what an engineer was. There were no engineers in my family. Not to say no one is, no one went to university in my family, but everyone studied business or law or, marketing. Like they all studied in more business-like or commerce-like fields. No one really studied sciences. So I didn't really have that like, oh, my mom's an engineer, my dad's an engineer, like they can teach me what they do. Like I didn't have anybody like that, right? And some kids are like that too. And if they have the opportunity to learn, then they may actually, go that route. And so that's kind of what drove me into robotics, and the fact that it's 100% like student-led, student-driven, student-designed is super important. I feel like other robotics competitions, yeah, the students are involved, but you basically hire a professional to do everything. You hire an engineer and you're like, okay, this is the problem I'm given. And they're like, okay, cool, here's your robot. Go to the competition and drive it, and that's it, right? But they don't know how it was built. They don't know from what it was built. They don't know why it was built a certain way. CRC allows for that and allows them to learn. And I like what you said at the beginning, Alec, about it not being about the final product. It's funny because in our rule book, like the first thing on the front page is like, if you've made it to the competition, you're already a winner. Like, it doesn't matter what you've shown up with, you've shown up, so you're already a winner. And yes, we give prizes, and yes, there's plaques and stuff like that, but you know what, at the end of the day, I have students coming up to me going, you know what, we didn't get one plaque, like we didn't place top 3 in anything, but I'm coming back next year and I'm gonna get top 3 next year. Or I'm gonna learn next year, or I'm gonna apply this next year because I saw the school that won first place, they did that and they showed me how to do it. And I think that's super important too, is a lot of competitions, it's competitive in nature. People are like, no, I'm not helping you. You're from another team. Why would I help you? Mm-hmm. But with CRC, we see that so much. It's like I walk around at the competition and I see in a kiosk 5 different t-shirts, and I'm like, those are kids from 5 different schools, right? They're all helping this one school. And that makes them learn a lot more than, I'm not showing you how I did that because I want that advantage, right?
Yeah, so it's the event is such a draw, right? I mean, here at Fab 16, we're all gathered. I mean, thankfully, I mean, I don't think half the people on this Zoom would be here if it weren't remote. But the event is also a big part of it. It's like that, something that draws us to be involved. It's sort of like you're in the community and you're vibing essentially off of everyone else around you, and that's one of the fantastic things about my Maker Faire. I always wanted to bring students down to the Maker Faire, to do a trip with students just to walk around the Maker Faire and in New York or in a different city, just so they get a different vibe of what people are working on in different parts of the world. So I'm wondering about that event, and I know I'm going to now introduce Yuri. I met Yuri because he was running the ICAO Innovation Fair, but you had an interesting, well, we saw a lot of innovation at the fair, and we saw some people who had been working on some pretty interesting technologies that were working towards being regulated, hopefully, or talking about their process of getting to the next phase in their research. But then you had a section for youth, and what I liked about your fair was that and we talked about this a bit, but like students just presented images, hand drawings of what the future of aviation is. And I thought that was a really nice, and it was a nice thing to recognize. It was just like that sort of very nice moment. And you saw the students that you gathered to this innovation fair from all over the world got a chance to just be in that zone in a very impressive group of people sharing their drawings. I don't know if you want to talk a bit about how that worked for you, setting that up at ICAO.
Sure, yes. Maybe 2 things. First of all, thank you for the opportunity to talk, and more importantly, for me to listen to everything that's being said. I'm definitely going to steal a lot of what was said, sorry. But the other thing I just want to say up front is, I don't know if I'm alone in this group, but I don't talk of the youth as a separate group of people because I consider myself the youth, although I am way too old to do that in any way logical. So I do it in an innovative way. And personally, I think that what you're doing here and the ideas you're sharing, this is innovation, this is youth. There isn't anything old that's been said till now. And I think that I shouldn't say it that way, but I think you understand what I'm saying. Yeah. I mean, every day that I wake up and watch a YouTube video that shows me how to do something strange that I didn't know I could do before, is a day that I feel young. And I think that's also what the youth that we call them are doing. So yeah, we're the International Civil Aviation Organization. I won't bore you too much with bureaucracy, but basically one of, I think, our key roles is to try and make the world smaller through aviation, but also through our ideas. And that is to say that if, we don't want a world where a lot of the future is only concentrated in a few places, corners of the globe. And innovation, what we call innovation, is just such a great way to get people connected. We didn't have to define innovation because I think it's one of those things that you just mentioned and people kind of are all thinking something similar. And if as soon as you try to define it, you start excluding things that you don't want to exclude, so they come up with a really long definition that's completely useless. So we've never defined innovation, but we know what it does. It makes people smile. It makes people, be a little, walk a little lighter and be generally happy about life and hopefully the world. So when it came to our event, we needed something that reached into the minds of all of the people in the world. And, probably the lowest common denominator we could come up was a paper and a pencil. So it had to be something that, people could just draw. The competition itself was held on 3 different levels. The one for the really young ones, it really was to just imagine how aviation could make life for the people around them better. So they didn't even have to obey the laws of physics. They could do whatever they wanted to. And, probably I saw things there that I think I've seen before, but I've seen a lot of things that told me more, and I shouldn't talk about me, but I think it told us as a community more about what these people go through every day. You know, if somebody's drawing a picture of how to, to fly over the field and check for snakes, that's the thing that they're trying to solve. They don't need a competition. They just need to tell us, okay, that's it. Then we had another group that was a little more serious in the sense that they had to start thinking a little bit about the how. And then the final one was just anybody who wanted to put a concept together in 3 dimensions and give us an engineering drawing that was also good. That was a competition because we did have a regional winners and a global winner, and we went through a very interesting process. But we celebrated all of them. One of the ways we celebrate the ideas was actually another innovator came to us and said, "Why are you guys always writing articles about things? Why don't you just create a comic book to explain things to people?" So we took a couple of these ideas, made a story around it, and we have comic books now. And I think that's much easier for people to connect with. One thing that I think one thing that as a community, we may have learned was, and this is probably known to everyone else in this group because we're a little late to innovation, but there are people, sometimes you have the same person with the problem and trying to solve that problem, right? And if you have 10 people and they're all trying to solve 10 of their own problems, they'll come up with their 10 solutions. But a lot of times a solution can solve other people's problems, and a problem can drive, solutions, people to develop solutions or repurpose their solutions. I think I've been watching so many documentaries online that show how, well, that this thing was invented, but that's not what they were actually trying to do. We've got to multiply that. And I think we're standing in front of this reality that it is actually, I don't think that difficult for us to encourage, because it encourages itself. There's so many people being born and learning STEM, and not only STEM, but all sorts of things. They're learning to think, and they're getting free and open access to information. And I think kind of what some of the speakers said before, I think a competition is now also a way, I don't want to sound like a bureaucrat here, but also a way to encourage good citizenship. And that's to say that, yes, if you see people sharing things and making the competition itself secondary, right, to what they are really, they want to build friendships through the experience. They want to smile, you'll see it in the picture. I think that's I wouldn't say that, that's the real performance indicator, not how good was that thing that solved the thing. Of course, you put $10 million over something, and I want to join that, but I'm not allowed to. But I think that's always a great accelerator. And so overall, I mean, as an international community, I think what we always have to take is the attendance of people who are not in the room, because that might show us what we forgot to do. And the last thing I'd say is definitely want this conversation and maybe others around it to end up with a real, whatever we call it, competition or not, but something that helps us do everything we're talking out with the backing of all of our logos, and so that we can give back to this community and also then join it, because like I mentioned, I think we're all also still youth. Thank you.
That's the point of this, is really just a starting, but the idea is maybe next year we can pilot something. I know in here locally, I've talked to a couple of schools that already keen to start doing something next year as a pilot project. So what we're going to do, and I can see, I'm sorry, I'm not reading anything on the chat. I'm listening, and I've got Zoom brain. I'm like looking at a little icon, but hearing such big words, and I love it. But I think that what's going to happen afterwards is that I'm hoping that this chat will be saved. I don't know, Liz, you've been doing a lot of these, or someone else. Yeah, it'll be saved. Perfect. Because I think there's gold happening on the side here that I'm not aware of, that I'm hoping we can all unpack and find a group of people that want to sort of build out some of these ideas. But what you're talking about is like this idea of sharing and open innovation is a perfect lead in for Christina, because the platform that Wikifactory is doing, and this is not just Christina's platform, it's also Scopes DF has got, is sharing out all this knowledge and plans and projects that teachers can work on. We got Instructables, the idea, YouTube, the sort of sharing platforms are so hugely important that it must be changing the way we learn, right? It must be changing the way that we get involved in things. So I guess for Christina, what do you like? How is open innovation changing education? Like, how is this idea of open sharing of knowledge changing the way people learn? I don't know if you tackle that in at Wikifactory. Certainly, you are part of that.
Thanks, Alex. I think you're absolutely right to mention the fact that we are an ecosystem that we're brewing. I'm very proud that it's everyone here, all of our initiatives, all of our organizations, we're actually building an ecosystem that truly is enabling open innovation at large. And in whether in a structured or an unstructured way, I think they all play a part, fundamentally changing the way that we can learn about making products, not to make for the sake of making, although that is also part of that process, but fundamentally to allow for youth to not reinvent the wheel, but really to build on the shoulders of the community. I would say of giants, but of the community. That was the initial inspiration that Wikifactory, what brought about Wikifactory, the co-founders, and in effect, to build on each other's work, to learn through the errors and the methods. There's nothing better for me when I was, my background is in youth entrepreneurship, in sustainability and social innovation. And it wasn't until the day that my co-founder said that he was going to teach me how to code. And I was so excited to get this is around 10 years ago, to get a new tool, my toolkit, that I was just so incredibly humbled by the mammoth contributions of the open source software community. There's not a single app today or software service today that is not built upon open source. And therefore, there's learning from existing documented libraries is just the best learning course. And I remember then within 6 months, I was being paid to develop websites on the side whilst we were developing Wikifactory. And to be honest, this is where the enabling technologies is in our favor. Just even 5 years ago, the idea of bringing out a new product idea was much more difficult, required a lot more investment, but thanks to digital fabrication and the networks and the learning and the resources that we're all building together in this ecosystem, we're allowing for youth to potentially thrive. So for me, it's really about allowing for youth to learn from each other, from the different projects that are happening around the world. We all have, there's this saying in again tech that the future is already here, it's just unevenly distributed. The truth is that I truly do believe in the ingenuity of people, of youth, and I'm with you, Yuri, that it's worth expanding our concept of youth because in effect, this is why we've been seeking to see how we can build upon our platform, because we've got thousands of projects, that's actually trying to solve real needs, real problems, design challenges. But we're finding that, there's real stakeholder groups that could be benefiting from distributed supplies. But in effect, for every off-the-shelf supply that is well documented and well replicated, there's actually thousands of projects that could benefit from funds to actually go about that replication process in a distributed way. That is the part that's not been tested. And the reality is we're talking about physical products, not virtual products. So it's been fantastic to live that tension of what is the difference of replicating and distributing open source hardware versus open source software. And we hear it from the community through the surveys and engaging very deeply with our community since the beginning, that they need support to get their products out. Whether it's their tandem bike from Argentina, they know that a foundation with 2,500 chapters around the world need their bike, but they have no way of supplying it, or no one's going to take the risk of actually rolling it out to see what it takes to replicate it and distribute it. So I think that's super key. And then at the same time, when we wanted to start building challenges, so it's great that we can boost learning, have people learn from the open source projects that are hosted on the site. and in our ecosystem, our broader platform ecosystem, we realized that, there was an aspect of how do we frame challenges? And I can't help but be reminded or by a quote that came to mind in the Indigenous Circle that happened a few days ago as part of Fab 16. A quote from the Aboriginal activist group came to mind, and it goes by the words of, if you've come to help me, you've wasted your time. If you have come to help me because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let's work together. There's truly an aspect of, we tend to look for global challenges, but I do think that maybe there's an aspect of really distributing the challenge mechanism itself. So like you were saying, Alec, youth can be empowered to actually bring that toolkit to their real local needs. And it's not about plug and play. It's about really understanding how they can understand their local context, the local vernacular, and applying what has been done elsewhere to those local needs, using their own ingenuity to configure reusable components that they can use in those circumstances. That was also why I was originally inspired with Wikifactory. It was actually a project called WikiHouse. That was a tiny home, a sustainable tiny home developed in the UK. And I was so inspired by the fact that it became quite a story when the New Zealand chapter, they'd built a network of architects around the world, quite a few, I think it was like over a dozen chapters around the world, iterating and replicating the original CNC milled house design. But it was this, the first one was actually New Zealand that saw the tiny home and saw how they could replicate it to make it earthquake resistant. And then on the same kind of vein, you had someone bringing it to retrofit the favelas in Brazil. Then people thinking, the house is made out of plywood sheets and I'm in Portugal, we have a ton of cork. How can we use local materials? This is exactly the type of local remix using global community at the heart. So this is where from learning, providing a learning platform, we can provide a learning curve where people can start getting to understand what is the skills, the resources to actually make things locally based on local needs. And I do think challenges have a role to play here because, as I say, there's so many products, so many solutions out there that need a sustainable model to be able to serve those who they're trying to innovate for. So that's for me the problematic that I'm trying to look at right now. And I'm so grateful for the session today. I couldn't be better surrounded. Thanks, Alec.
Thank you. That's really a nice way to sort of I don't know, I'm really excited about the idea of open innovation, this concept of sharing, the whole Fab Lab thinking of like share the bits and, make the atoms or work on the atoms sort of locally. And I don't know if that's a good way to put it, but maybe I'm going to actually jump right. I'm cognizant of the time right now. So it's 6:10 and I'm going to quote a YouTuber that I've been watching a lot of. I'm a semi-professional amateur and I am certainly that when it comes to managing a Zoom talk. So I could tell that the time is running low for us. So I want to get to a couple, like open up to a couple Q&A if possible. But Liz, just quickly, I guess, how is this, like you're so involved at the Fab Foundation and thinking about how we integrate learning Fab Lab ways, and you've done the Fab Academy, you've done a lot of this. How is this sort of conversation, fitting into that conversation of education and Fab Labs in schools or museums, because you've been in both those contexts?
I'd say that
it's a big question, but
it is a big question, and I'm going to answer the part that I want to. So the theme that I'm seeing from a lot of the panelists today and the side chat is the question about problems and where the problems come from and who's solving the problems. And I think the general agreement is that the youth, the problems should be solved by youth, but also the problems can come from youth. So coming from looking at my experience with like doing not only science fairs at the Science Center, but also robotics challenges I mentor a girls robotics team all the way to the Fab kind of world where people make stuff and go share it at Maker Faire. I think there are some things to pick out between kind of that. There's a range of different ways to involve students in bits to its. And I think some of the important things that everyone has touched on is who's making the problems, who's solving the problems. But the constraints around that, their constraints are necessary for creativity, and constraints really help with creativity, especially for kids. When kids don't know where to start, it's because they have a blank piece of paper and they have endless possibilities. But if those constraints are built in, and then there's the deadline, what's nice about Dale is sharing about Maker Faire, people are sharing their stuff. Well, that's very important that there is a day and a place for Maker Faire, that deadline, that time where we all share, not just that someday we'll share this project, but having that deadline, having those constraints, having those self-defined problems, whether they're local or they're global, but they're something that the children really care about and they can connect to us. So I think everyone's touched on something of those themes, but that's where you see the most success, whether it's from a big student or a little student. All of those things are kind of important to get to that sharing and that problem solving. So so that's my
That's great.
partial answer to your
That's fine. I
question. And I know that we have a few minutes to talk, so I want to give us a few minutes to talk.
Yeah, thank you. So maybe I don't know if there are any questions on the chat, Fiona, or if anybody would like to ask a question based on what they've heard.
I think we should go around and let people comment,
Sure.
sort of do a roundtable, because that'll give everybody the opportunity. So the next person on on my screen, because I rule the world, is John. John, do you have anything you'd like to comment or add?
I guess just from what I've seen through my experience at Xprize, I've seen that it's the combination of a worthy cause combined with an incentive like a prize or something else that can really enhance competition and encourage people to really develop novel solutions to solve challenging problems. And in our competitions, we've seen that people in teams working incredibly hard, often after their 9 to 5, and it's really because they're passionate about the work and the interesting nature of what it is that they're trying to solve. So thank you.
Joel?
Sure, great. It's an absolute privilege to be here and to learn from you all and to hear all these great perspectives. The elephant in the room for me concerns mentorship, the role of mentorships, mentors, educators, and it comes back to the the notion of the well-posed problem, and I mean that in a very STEM-centric way. So I'm a big advocate for creativity. And allowing students to explore, discover, make mistakes, fail. But what do we do when they hit an obstacle where they don't know what the next step is? And even before that, what is that initial step? And I'm all for allowing students to pose their own problems and their own challenges. But how do you get them to that stage where they understand what a well-posed problem actually is? I'd like to start with something way too ambitious. I'd like to change the world, and I want to support that in all my students and everyone I collaborate with and work with. I think that's what we all should be doing on this journey. But when it comes down to actually making an impact, you have to be able to constrain. You have to be able to bring that to a place where we have a starting point where you can make some progress. Now, students, the way education has been framed for us in the industrial age is that we're given textbook problems, right? We're given well-posed problems in our training. And then we get to the point where innovation happens and we don't know how to state our own problems. And that's where mentorship is, I think, key. But if we're going to break the industrial model of education, we have to train in how to pose problems that you can make progress on. And I feel like idea of mentorship and the importance of Fab Labs for that, and training not only technicians but educators and those in the community that share and spread skills. There has to be some way of standardizing or building a curriculum that can go into the traditional education models, and that's something I would love to see across the network. And I know Fab Academy and this approach to training facilitators and spreading these skills and knowledge is happening, but I don't see it happening enough in schools and colleges and so on. I know there's lots of maker spaces that aren't running, right? Mm-hmm. Because you don't have that champion there. Sorry, that's my bit of a rant, but I think that's the elephant in the room. How do we get the mentorship model fixed?
Definitely want to hear about elephants in the room. They're good.
Claire, did you have something? Anybody want to comment on that too? So,
yeah, can I interject?
Okay, so just a sec, we'll have you interject and then we'll come back to you, Claire, okay?
So I want to speak a little bit about this because I've been working with Joel in the Innovation Lab for the past, well, for the whole summer actually. And in the creation of one of the challenges, which is the Inclusive Hackathon, one of the aspects of the mentorship we give to students is always to what extent do we want to guide them? To what extent do we want to question them? And then how much time that takes? How do we meet students? Do we meet them in teams? Do we divide teams? Do we meet them individually? And then what does a meeting of a student, especially online, right? What does it look like? So, you know, I think there are a lot of things that we take for granted when we're able to accompany students into the process of innovation, the process of creativity, in teaching them how to, you know, prepare for, you know, complex, wicked problems, complex challenges, ill-defined challenges. But one of the things that is certainly not discussed is what are the underlying theories of the dialogue that we undertake with the students. And I think that's, you know, that's aside from teaching. It's aside from the creation of a makerspace. It's what is this dialogue made of? And how do you get the ideas to come out in a safe way? And then what do you do with them? And to what extent, what is the balance, I guess, of, you know, well-designed accompaniment as opposed to letting the students speak? And perhaps one of the biggest challenges I've had in the Innovation Lab is to work with external partners that become mentors that very often come in as specialized subject matter experts. And they know the topic, they know what they're talking about, and they really want to teach something specific, as opposed to mentors who are there to really work with students. And, you know, I don't know, maybe Joel can come up with, you know, more of that kind of accompaniment if you want to reveal a bit more of what you've done, because you've done an amazing job over the summer. The feedback of the students was fantastic. So there's probably something to unpack there that's really useful.
Thanks, Anne-Louise. I think I'd like to just keep it rolling around the room. I think, but to start that conversation and to have as many different voices about trying to solve that problem, because the context that you're working in is so flexible, and there doesn't need to be a one-size-fits-all solution, but there are basic principles within that you can transport to all these different settings. And I think that's what we're looking for. We're looking for that playbook, that guidebook, that set of good principles that you can sort of pick and choose from in your context, in your local environment, in your educational level, and so on, and build out innovation for young people. And that way, there's not one size fits all. But the importance of mentors and training mentors and educating mentors and having those principles agreed upon and systematically agreed upon in some way, even if it's not completely set in stone, I think is an important challenge. Maybe for the research community, maybe for community partners, maybe for industry and education and all the stakeholders together. But I'd like to have that playbook myself, even though I'm working on a part of it.
Claire?
Yeah, hi. Yes, so I think this keeps drawing my mind back. So we ran a protothon event with high school students this year. If anyone knows protothons, yeah, prototyping hackathon. They had to build a prototype by the end of the day out of cardboard, and they had access to Raspberry Pis and LEDs and all of that, and some sensors for like temperature and light and things like that. One thing I found was we had 4 schools participate, and we made them mix up. They couldn't, like, as much as possible, we had kids on the same teams from different schools who didn't know each other. And we distributed the kids that had coding experience between the teams as well, to make sure that every team kind of had someone who, because, you know, you get kids in, not all of them have the same set of skills, but, you know, you get a few gems in there that have a bit of experience. So we made them split up. They couldn't all like form a team together that they, were the like super team. In terms of prizes, they could get a certificate and they could win some chocolate and things like that. And we had different types of prizes, like a teamwork prize, as well as like innovation and things like that. We did present them more themes rather than strictly a problem statement that they had to go through. And I was thinking about with this conversation, and one of the lessons we learned from the whole process is, you know, it's really key for them to find whatever they're trying to solve is relevant to them, or that they can imagine in their own community, in their own context. We were focused around, we want them to solve local community challenges. And they, you know, address that. We did have a theme around interesting disability, and one of the teams did have a kid who was disabled, but he was also the coder on that team, and they really like came together and came up with a solution together, which was really great to sort of see. But I think that relevance to them is really important. We also sort of, because of time limitations, because we only have one day, they couldn't go through much of that, have much time on that, creating a proper problem statement and brainstorming, going through that proper solution ideation process, because they only have very quickly you got to come up, because you got to leave enough time for build. So we've sort of learned from that and go, well, next time it'd be really great to take them through that process, give them maybe 2 themes. We are probably about too many this time, and you know, they get that whichever theme is most relevant to them, and they can sort of see in their context, and then go through the process of creating a problem statement, and then go through the full process of, you know, ideation and creating a solution, and then go into, okay, we've got what we think should be the solution, let's do a little bit of a prototype process. So I think that's really important. I also think coming up to that global level, that will be useful, because what's relevant or relatable in one country or in one community, you know, poverty, although we like, is a good example, is like a theme, you know, that might be, some kids might find that relevant in their own community, but they might not sort of see, other kids might not see it in their community, even though there is poverty everywhere, for example. But like rainforest is a good example. You know, we've got rainforests in the north of Australia, but here where I am, rainforest isn't a thing, but bushfires is a big thing for us. And I think the other thing, if we're thinking on a global level, like it needs to be accessible, and it needs to be, you know, something that if you sort of, not everyone has the same access to the same facilities and the same, you know, they might not have money and budget to do big things. So you've got to sort of account, I think, for that.
Renee, you had a comment next?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I put something in the chat. You know, following up on what Joel was talking about. I just wanted to recommend the work of Michael Fullen, who's at the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education, an emeritus professor there. But the new pedagogies for deep learning network that they've created is really interesting, open to schools. They're operating in multiple countries around the world. But the foundation documents that have been published as books are fascinating, and I think really inform the discussion well here. And really, it's all about talking about the importance of transforming education to really focus much more on students generating their own problems, taking those big, amorphous, difficult issues, doing research, and then identifying a way that they can get involved, and then taking that on. And whether it's as a small group, an individual, a class, school, whatever, and then using that to transform education, and really engage students and develop the passion for them, which is exactly what we see, certainly on the science fair side, with the best projects that that we see. When we ask kids why did you do your project, because very few of them do it to actually get to the science fair. It's only about 10%. The vast majority of them, tell us that they want to make the world a better place. They want to help people. They were passionate about a particular issue or a topic, and they just wanted to pursue it. And ultimately, I think that's the most powerful motivation that can drive it. I think you can provide guidance through challenges and point students in interesting directions and say, have you thought about this? But ultimately, if they identify their own problems, it's the most powerful and engaging approach. Coming back to something that Joel was talking about, the idea of how do you create a well-formed problem or a well-formed question, and part of that, I think, is that we have a tendency to underestimate the power of iteration. And there's an assumption, especially when we do things in a structured class-like way, where for one semester in a school or whatever, okay, now you're going to be innovative, and so you've got 3 months to learn how to be innovative, and the reality is that you don't learn to create or develop well-formed questions or play a musical instrument or do art or anything without starting to do it badly. And so it's the matter of allowing people to start off with not having a great question, but pursuing it anyway, and then coming back and saying, well, now that you finished or you've been through that process once, what would you change the next time? And that iterative approach, I think, is really essential. The other thing I wanted to touch on was just the idea of open source, which I think is incredibly powerful, and because we tend to get slotted more into the science side than the maker and technology side. It's a bit of an issue for us, not so much for kids who have embraced open technology and all the various published libraries for coding and that sort of thing. But on the science side and even on the engineering side, there's still a bit of a mentality around intellectual property, patenting, and protecting and secrecy. And I think that's a cultural shift that we are working with kids on and trying to educate them around the importance of sharing and the importance of open technology, and that a patent isn't everything, and it also doesn't guarantee that you're going to make millions of dollars. In fact, the best thing that you might do with your idea is to share it and allow others to collaborate and make your idea even better. So all those points, I think, are really essential.
Leo?
Hi, everyone. What can I say? Thank you. I mean, this is really inspiring, and I agree with all that you said. I've been focusing my workshops like in design challenges, and one of the things, I don't know who said, remind me, like, I had plenty of materials and tools, but I only shared like a really few ones, like a mini kit for each one of the students or participants, and that made them work together. I mean, because they all wanted to build something more than what their own materials could get them there, And well, I don't know. I don't know what to say. Thank you. Thank you very much. This is like a great session.
Great. Mr. Kumar, I'm sorry, I don't know how to say your first name.
Yeah, hello everyone. Thank you so much. Like, it's great to like hear and listen to Dale. Actually, like I've been, as soon as I saw Dale coming up for a panel, I was really excited. Like I've been following Maker Faire for the last like 10-15 years, and like it has been great. So I am Deepjyoti, like you can call me Deep. I am from Assam. It's the northeast part of India, basically. Like, and we have been running a maker program over here called SparkBee. So trying to get more people into making. And like what we thought, like as per the topic of the discussion, like open innovation challenge for like the youth. What we actually thought was like we have to like at least get the students started into making, like giving them the confidence to build things. Give them a like it's like once you know how to cook, like you will never be hungry if you have food at your home, like if you know how to cook, right? So it's like so basically if students can make thing and like express their own creativity in all different ways, or like different ways of expression, and just give them a place where they can explore those ideas. It might not be like related to only engineering, it can be related to arts, it can be related to air modeling. So in my team, like we have people from all backgrounds. So I'm an engineer, but like we have a fashion designer in our team. We have a photographer in our team. We have a music designer in our teams. But like the basic idea being, we like to share what we are doing over here, and we are trying to get making to as many people in at least my part of the region, to as many people as possible. Like so, 80% of the population is like in the rural part. So no infrastructure basically. So even if we think of like having a good Fab Lab placing over like everywhere, like the economics will never support it. Like we cannot like get that much funding to get so many, like such a huge funding in all the places. So we have to start with what we have basically. So designing low cost activities which can start, which with the help of which they can at least start thinking something differently. That is our like one of the primary objective, and getting the teachers excited about like making, that is one of the most factor. Like most of the teachers in the school, like they are like not all are excited to like do like try to do something different from what they have been doing in the last 10 years. You cannot, and it has always been a struggle to just go into school and like tell them, okay, you have to start doing something like this. It never works. Like only few teachers will be there like who genuinely want to do something and try different activities with their kids. So there in the someone talked about like mentorship, the problem of mentorship. So what we thought, like if the teachers alone, like we have a teacher like for all these classes, different classes, but like we need maybe like more teacher like us. Teacher basically specialize in like know how to use the machines or like all these activities, and the teachers can help them to design activities for like the teacher. That the particular person is an extra person, like extra mentor, which is hired by the school or like run by program, and that particular person like is responsible for designing the activities that can be done in the classroom with the help of his expertise. And like so yeah, like and even like involving the youth, like the higher the peer-to-peer learning process, that is something we really value over here. The higher kid students or even the lower class kid students can like start exchanging ideas and even like teach each other. That is something. And we ran program where we had to handle about like 700-800 students in a camp, and we were only like 6 mentors. So it was very difficult to like having 6 mentors, and how do we handle like 700-800 students. So we asked the whole school to provide us with some volunteers from the school itself. So some nominated themselves, and we handpicked few kids, and like we had like around like 30 students like in their upper classes. We basically targeted the upper classes as of now, and like we like each mentor trained around like 5 to 6 mentors for their own help. And each mentor, so during the camp when we had like during the actual event, the students were the mentor along with the students, they delivered the whole camp. And I think that fairly like help us to get all the kids into making different activities. So yeah, those are a few things that we tried, and like hopefully it will help us. And like we are also trying to get low cost like programmable kits and like activities design basically those kind of activities and get it to as many people as possible. So basically democratizing making is one of the main like reason to survive.
Awesome. I have 3 more people that would like to speak as far as I know, just because I know we're past our time. I hope everybody's okay with that. Edward, you're up.
Perfect, thank you. So as Mr. Mathewson, or I think actually, I was a student of Mr. Mathewson. I'm not sure if I can call him
You
Alec
can call
now.
me Alec now.
Yeah, I was
okay.
like,
Go
wait
for
a
it.
second, I can call you Alec now. Yes, so I graduated LCC actually this year. And so Mr. Mathewson was my teacher, Alec was my teacher. And I think that like, as we sort of participate in the Fab Lab, we really realize the sort of operations aspect of it, keeping this thing going, keeping sort of students involved. And I think that the 2 problems that we've generally identified is that it's mainly, and I think this is the case for all co-curriculars throughout all schools, is definitely sort of the competition with other sort of activities that all students face, the sort of lack of time of, well, I want to do this, I also have sports, I also have other activities, and it really gets, you know, how can we sort of allow students to properly manage their time and help them manage their time, which is something that I've personally struggled. I think we all kind of struggle with that sort of thing. You know, we want to do so much, but there's really only 24 hours in a day. How can we plan a project so that we get it done when we want to get it done? And it was mentioned, it's been mentioned earlier in this presentation that it's a lot about the journey. I think that sort of planning projects is something that seems to be useful in many careers from what I understand. And this is definitely something that the Fab Lab can be useful, and design and innovation in general can be useful in teaching. Another sort of problem that I think I've noticed is some students, I think, feel shy about coming to the Fab Lab. They sort of feel intimidated. They're sort of like, oh, I'm not smart enough, you know, all this coding, all this stuff, the learning threshold is too difficult. It was been mentioned. Oh, thank you, Miss Nance. Oh, I think I can call Miss Nance and Fiona now too. Can I?
Yes, you
oh
can.
my God, I'm coming to these realizations, everyone, and it's very interesting. But thank you. Anyway, I think it was mentioned that we should keep these spaces open and sort of encouraging students to come and hang out and not necessarily say you have to build something, you have to come to design something. And I think that that's definitely a powerful sort of encouragement to show, and as sort of students come into these spaces, they might notice that, you know, it's not that, you know, it's hard. It's obviously hard, you know, but but you can do it. Like anyone can do it. Like it's just taking the steps to learn the different skills, to put the work in, and then eventually it does happen. So I think that those were definitely the 2 things I noticed from my time at Fab Lab at LCC. And yeah, that's about it. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks. Next was, where are you? Who was next? I had it on my list. Natalia?
It's Nandita. Hi.
Hi.
Hi. So I'm Nandita from Kerala, the southernmost part of India. So it's actually pretty early in the morning here, 4 in the morning. So I guess it's very late, but still, I was just hoping that I would be able to hear everyone talk. And I came here basically because I'm really interested in having being part of challenges and to create or design those challenges, and also because Dale was part of today's talk, and I always followed Make Magazine and him as well. So anyway, so it's what so I have completed Fab Academy. I'm a maker, but I have always been doing things. But then I completed Fab Academy recently, and what I have to say is kind of more like a self-criticism, I believe. So although maybe Fab Academy gave me a lot of skill set or tools, I don't know whether it has actually helped me help me improve my thinking in terms of solving problems. Like when I look at the alumni, one thing that I think about is what is the kind of solutions that all of them has come up with, for lack of a better usage, that can actually change the world. So I really question whether it is whether it is those skill sets that is required because skill sets are something that you can acquire on your own, or whether you need, I mean, in an institutionalized setup, like, I mean, it is multidisciplinary or all that words that we use, but then it still is institutionalized, and whether it is it is the right thing to go about while being a maker. And also, more than that, whether students should be whether these skill set, as in this, at least the people that I have encountered in Fab Academy from India have no idea how to use the skill set they acquired to create their tangible solutions for the problems that they see around them. And more often, what I understand is that they don't even see that there is a problem around them, or that they can actually solve these with the skill set that they already have. So one thing I think is making students learn critical thinking more than anything, and probably even to an extent what Joel said, the idea of a mentor is great, but then how much, to what level these mentors can help you, I'm not sure. So in my lab, something that my lab, which is a Super Fab Lab Kerala, something that we have is the lab is run by, it is one of the biggest labs in the world, Fab Labs in the world, I think the second largest or something, next to MIT. And still, like, it is run by 20 somethings, and the total output, like, it's been open for this long, and what is the total output that has come from that lab? We don't have anything to show, as in like a tangible thing to show. So maybe it is not whether you have so many things, while on the other hand, I see smaller labs quietly working their way through, solving problems. So maybe it's, the solution is not about the having, somebody said the access to things, but then it may not be access to things, because in other than the rest of India, in my state at least, if the students have like access to these things, there are mobile labs set up by engineering colleges, which will go to schools. So there are all these infrastructures, and what is the total output? I'm actually surprised to find out that there isn't much of a good solution to many problems that they can solve. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on my list is Caroline. Caroline, do you have anything you want to add? Okay, I'm going to move to Thomas. Thomas, are you there? Okay, I guess not. The last person, does anybody else want to add anything? Liz, anybody? I've gone through everybody that's left.
No.
Dale?
Dale?
Yeah, just, one thing that I see in this and various things is, it's the power of sharing, and the really, whether it's competitions or whatever, getting the work that people do, to make it more visible, more public, more accessible, is really at the heart of this. Someone might have a great idea, but they keep it to themselves, like in a makerspace, which I see, and it goes nowhere, right? And they don't know if someone, I've even seen this, from grad students who have a great project, but nobody knows about it. And, it's that kind of mixing of different ideas. The idea that someone has done something is a validation of someone who has an idea that hasn't done something yet, right? And so I think I always kind of imagine that there's kind of the world repository of all this. Yes, we have it in places like Instructables and other things, but it's some ways it's much more than that. And I think if we could also think about how things that enter science fairs and competitions, how do they live on from that? How do we, boost them to another level? That's another place. I'd like to believe that we as a community care a lot about things that don't, problems that have solutions that don't have a business model, that don't get taken up by the, the tech communities or VCs and stuff, but yet could solve, just like we saw through COVID, the sharing designs, having them made locally was really a way to tackle an important set of problems globally. And I think this is a strategy that we have that we don't, we need to get more people to understand that strategy and more people to participate in the ecosystem and building it.
Yeah, that's, I love the idea of just a global repository, a repository for repositories too. I think, anyways, I want to thank everyone. Like there's so much going on here. And I'm like, someone said, I was saying to someone, I feel like I'm in a fishbowl a bit, but the ideas are so big and there's so much to unpack and to discuss. I want to thank everyone for contributing. And I think that if you just put your email in the chat, if you want to be kind of part of figuring out what this could look like, I think it's important to stay connected and to share. So I definitely want to, and I definitely want to move this to the next stage and to find a group of people that really want to work on something, which means a lot of sticky notes or whatever it is, and then sharing ideas and getting feedback, because it would be pretty awesome. We can certainly in Quebec pilot something, whatever it is, competition, gathering, but just, I would like to see what happens in the fall, or not fall, sorry, in the new year. And so hopefully we can get enough energy around that. That would be pretty amazing and we can learn from that. So thank you so much, everyone. And thank you, Dale, Yuri, Christina, Rennie, Liz, Anne, Louise, and then Joel, who was an ad on there, but he provided people on the chat, everyone. And then there was also, John had to leave early. But thank you so much. And I look forward to, following up with this.
Thank you, Alec.
Thank you for organizing this, Alec.
Thank you.
It's a lot of work, but let's move on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great. Thank you, Alec.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Edward. Glad you were there.
Really happy I came, sir. I don't know if I should address you like that anymore.
But when I started working at LCC, there were teachers that I had when I went to school here, and I was calling them sir, and we're all like, adults. So it's okay. It's a hard thing to shake, right?
Yes, it'll
I'll keep nudging. It's okay. I had a hard time being called sir when I started working here. Yeah. No,
and I came from a school where when I went to school, everybody called each other by their first names. So when I got to Quebec and everybody called people sir and ma'am and Mr. and Mrs., it was very bizarre.
Yeah, it's an adaptation. But thank you so much. It was really fun.
Yeah, it was. We'll talk more about it.
Yeah, definitely.
All right.
Bye.
Have a good day.